my fellow citizens of all nations. What is enlightenment? Enlightenment is man's emergence from his self-imposed knowledge. Knowledge is the inability to use one's own understanding without another's guidance. This knowledge is self-imposed, if its cause lies not in lack of understanding, but in indecision and lack of courage to use one's own mind without another's guidance. Dare to know. Have the courage to use your own understanding is therefore the motto of enlightenment. Laziness and cowardice are the reasons why such a large part of mankind gladly remain minors all their lives, long after nature has freed them from external guidance. There are lots of things in our lives, for example. It's not some sort of a great intellectual debates, such as, for example, religion. Religion is not some sort of a religious debates are not some sort of great intellectual debate. The basic question there is whether those people are honest and whether those people have truly the courage to use their own understanding and whether those people truly dare to know. And if those people, can do these things, then the answer to the debates is obvious and question to those debates. And those debates would be finished once and for all. And not only religion, but many other things as well. Those things have nothing to do with some sort of intelligence. Even in science and art, for example, when people come and use the same religious pretext, for example, to say that, those whatever is not so, and we are definitely some sort of a divine creatures, and we could not possibly have evolved from some sort of animals, while we are animals, and while we claim that we are human-centric thinking, right? This is what it comes down to, and etc. Those things are not really intellectual. Like, there is a certain point where those things stop being an intellectual debate, and it moves toward an emotional debate. It goes toward an ego, and toward those things, and they go far in from the reason, because of what? Because of laziness and cowardice. That's all. Like, laziness and cowardice. Like, we think that courage is only necessary to go to war and stand in front line and pull the trigger or do something, but no. Like, thinking requires an enormous amount of courage as well, because those courageous thinkers created this world. Now it's very easy to consider something impossible rather than work on it and figure it out. Like, anybody could have simply given up and be like, this technology, etc., is impossible to create it, etc., and just sit there. So this is the very important point. And the another, by the way, title of this work could have easily been How to Survive and Advice. If I have a book that thinks for me, a pastor who acts as my conscience, a physician who prescribes my diet, and so on, then I have no need to exert myself. I have no need to think. If only I can pay, others will take care of that disagreeable business for me. If only I can pay. If only I can quote somebody else. Only if somebody else has written something related to this thing that proves that thing. If only those things. If only there are things that will make me more comfortable. If only there are things that will take and make those decisions for me, so I don't have to make those decisions because I don't want to take overall the responsibility for it. This is where those things come down to, or this type of thinking that if some millions and billions of people believe in something, then that thing must be true. Where that's an absurd reasoning generally, because that's not how anything works. Just because millions and billions of people believe in something, that doesn't mean that it is true. In fact, there is greater chance that to be false. Just like the history is false, like what common people are taught in education, or not if not false, just only half of the story at best. And just like that, it's not some great secret that for history is, for example, written by winners, and there is no great value in studying history because what is history? Some sort of what happened in that age, that year, and that month. That's a history, or why that happened, what was the reasoning, and etc. And some people may be like, no, okay, history right now cannot be falsified because of the modern era, but that's not so. Why? Because it's not about the technology, the tools. Tools may change, but human nature has not changed, and it's within human nature and human interest to falsify those things. So, history will be kind toward you in that way. First, these guardians make their domestic cattle stupid and carefully prevent the docile creatures from taking a single step without the leading strings to which they have fastened them. Then they show them the danger that would threaten them if they should try to walk by themselves. Now, this danger is really not very great. After stumbling a few times, they would at last learn to walk. However, examples of such failures intimidate and generally discourage all further attempts. Imagine if a kid, when you're like, I'm talking about the young kids, when we cannot walk and we crawl, and you try to as a kid stand up and you fell down, you will fall. That's a natural thing. And imagine if some entire world come to you at that point to be like, kid, never tried to walk again, never attempted, because you have just fell and that was very painful, you cried, etc. And you also told the same thing to yourself. Imagine then entire human would still crawl and walk on 4 legs because we will not be able to walk. We will be like, why? Because of why? Because of lack of courage. We would use instead of walking on 2 legs, we would be like, okay, our hands would have the same function to crawl, and we're like, okay, now we have 4 legs. We don't need hands. That's where we would have been. And now failure is just part of some process. Just because you stumble a few times, that doesn't mean anything. You try, you keep attempt to do it, and you will eventually succeed. And that's how we walk. Hardly there is any kid that gets it right on the first time. It's perfectly fine to stumble a couple times. Thus, it is very difficult for the individual to work himself out of the knowledge, which has become almost second nature to him. He has even grown to like it, and it is at first really incapable of using his own understanding because he has never been permitted to try it. Dogmas and formulas, these mechanical tools designed for reasonable use or rather abuse of his natural gifts, are the fetters of an everlasting knowledge. Truly those things are truly chains that force individual to be in this knowledge for a very long time. There is this notion, idea that whatever is well said by anyone is also well said by me. Some people may be like, oh, so what one should do, should never read, should never, etc. No, just stop quoting. Stop quoting. It means that the best ideas are common property. Instead of quoting them, say it, because best ideas are truly common property. Because you share that idea. Instead of quoting them, because individuals use those quotes to self-defense mechanisms, right? Because they are afraid that, okay, if people don't like what I said there, then I will be like, okay, this is not I who said it, but this is that person. So you are hiding behind that person and that idea. So it's not yours. It's not. You are violating this principle of the best ideas being common property. And there are great works and nonsensical works. There are fairy tales, essentially. Fairy tales in a negative way. Not they're great fairy tales, but negative fairy tales which are very popular within people. And there are truly great works. Choose between them. That is why they are only a few men who walk firmly and who have emerged from knowledge by cultivating their own minds. Very important sentence here. Cultivating their own minds. To cultivate your own minds it's a sign of a culture. To cultivate your own mind means to think. The words are just like food is for the body. So feed your mind properly instead of giving it some things that will make it, some degrade your mind and etc. And cultivate your own garden essentially. Take care of it. Now you will eventually, the way you will program yourself, what kind of information you put there, that will be your actions. That's how we will act, and dare to know. Individuals should not avoid uncomfortable. Should not avoid this. Just because something upsets you, or you kind of don't like it because it kind of sucks. Like a lot of people have same issue with the Bruford's law, for example, or General Robert Bruford's works. That's hardly reasoning, or toward Darwin, for example. So, and this is eventually what is enlightenment. Enlightenment is to dare to use your own understanding, to dare to know. And therefore, a public can achieve enlightenment only slowly. A revolution may bring about the end of a personal despotism or of avaricious tyrannical oppression, but never a true reform of modes of thoughts. New prejudices will serve in place of the old as guidelines for the unthinkable multitude. And this saying, what I'm going to read right now, is like I would love to think about it, and very interesting, something to think about deeply. Look, now I hear this cry from all sides. Do not argue, the officer says. Do not argue, drill, the tax collector. Do not argue, pay, the pastor. Do not argue, believe. It's such a great thing to just think about. Do not argue, the officer says. Do not argue, drill, the tax collector. Do not argue, pay, the pastor. Do not argue, believe, and etc. Only one ruler in the world says, argue as much as you please, but obey. We find restrictions on freedom everywhere. But which restrictions is harmful to enlightenment? Which restriction is innocent and which advances enlightenment? I reply, the public use of one's reasoning must be free at all times, and this alone can bring enlightenment to mankind. This thing here, the argue as much as you please but obey, is kind of a mocking. It's kind of critical, because it's look how absurd this is. Like, argue as much as you please but obey. It's what a tyrann would tell you, powerful tyrann. Like, and he kind of referred to him, Frederick the Great, the Prussian ruler, because it was kind of his attitude, like argue as much as you please but obey slaves, but argue as much as you want. So it's kind of critique here, but obviously cannot be very direct because he will lose his head. But I can clearly see here the critique and some sort of humor. But some may disagree and say that it's not meant that way. But that's okay. That's what I think. That's also a part of enlightenment, to use your own understanding. That's what I've understood there, and I saw. Because if he kind of mocks the Frederick, but you cannot tell the dictator like, what are you doing? Like, argue as much as you like, but obey. Like, it's like, talk as much as you want, but you will still go tomorrow and work as my slaves. It would be the same thing to say. And he mocked it. When we ask, are we now living in an enlightened age? The answer is no. But we live in an age of enlightenment. Now, from today's perspective, if we were to ask this question, are we living in the age of enlightened? No. Like, the answer to this question, unfortunately, would be no and yes. Yes, in that sense that we have access to the knowledge. I mean, knowledge is pretty much accessible at this point, but thing is that many things happen. In some places the answer is definitely no. Some places, like quite a large number of places, like people are definitely they are technically called zero-conscious citizens, but they are not citizens. They are military slaves. And inside, whoever thought we claim that we don't have no longer eternal rulers and emperors, etc. Now they just change their names. Okay, they won't call them their empires, etc. But they are rulers, permanent rulers. But neither we will live in an age of enlightenment. We kinda are somewhere, but thing is that at the same time, who would have imagined that these number of information, etc., would be available, but people would choose to not to use this to enlighten themselves. Who would have thought this? Like to people, this is where herd mentality comes, I believe, and just because we live in a period essentially where the age of enlightenment kind of failed. And because it failed, because it could not foresee what would happen. But at the same time, we cannot say it absolutely. The answer will be no and yes. Just like many people that, for example, that's seen the movie Idiocracy, or we kind of live in that world right now. They feel that way. Why? Because like people basically for example, writing and producing some sort of intellectual works kind of became a business. And no, like people don't write something because they have some sort of want to say something very important. No, they're just writing some sort of it became a kind of cult, for example. It's in a certain way. And just like the people want to establish themselves as guardians, so they try to establish themselves as guardians, and they want to think and share, basically prevent the other people to think and share this in basically entertainment and etc. Rather than let people, basically this is what people and automatically do, and I don't think this is the planned for by some sort of threat. But I think this is just non-intending consequences. People would rather choose beautiful lies. People generally are like that. It's not. I don't think it's anybody's fault. People would rather choose beautiful lies than painful truth, because they don't dare to know. They don't have the courage. They lack the courage. So beautiful lies are loved, and it's a very popular thing. So it's better to believe that, for example, when you are told this story, oh, you are heroes there and you are liberating. And no, the wars are never about that. It's about winner and loser. The winner is winner. The loser is evil and beast and etc. The wars are never about right or wrong. It's about who wins and who loses, because clearly the winner will be the judge and the loser will be the one that is judged. And other main thing, and this is not really anybody's fault. And also people would rather, when they are tired all the, rather than thinking about and learning about something complicated and that is not even pleasurable, and it's very unfair and brutal thing to learn about, rather than learning those things and rather than sympathizing with other people and their suffering and realizing that the borders are simply arbitrary thing and we are just all human beings and we are the same and we laugh at the same thing, we want the same thing, every human being wants to love, etc. Rather than realizing and those things and taking other people's suffering to our heart, and etc., we are too selfish, and at the same time large public is very tired of it. And instead of enlightening themselves and bringing the age of enlightenment, they would rather watch entertainment. They would rather do something that's simply a killing of a time or waste of a time. And this is also the human weakness. Like there is the individual IQ, for example, the individual's intellectual capability, and there is also a collective intellectual capability, or whatever you would like to call it. And usually, in most places that quality is very low, and even though those education etc is really low within them within the masses, because like because of weakness, and this is not the cowardice, laziness and cowardice, because of laziness and cowardice, definitely because of that. So it's so where we are right now, are we in the age of enlightenment? Definitely no. Are we in age of enlightened? Definitely not. But most of the times in libraries, the Project Gutenberg, etc., many things are free and things are way better. Basically, if you want tools, you can get it. You know, it's at least most people, and there are some people obviously that cannot. I mean these days. So if you ask this question from correct perspective, it would be that you know some basically no, we are nowhere. We are neither in enlightened age, and neither we are in age of enlightenment. And by the way, it would be interesting if you were to share what you think about this. Like, are we now living in an age of enlightenment, or are we now living on age of enlightened, or where, in which point are we right now? Now, let's move to this thing. I have emphasized the main point of the Enlightenment: man's emergence from his self-imposed knowledge, primarily in religious matters, because our rulers have no interest in playing the guardian to their subjects in the arts and sciences. Above all, knowledge in religion is not only the most harmful but the most dishonorable. And it is very interesting to think about how this thing is now. You know, who became the rulers in at last free part of the world, and what is going on? It's like now kind of on the ruler. There are many rulers now. For one of them is the public. The public wants to exercise, feel that the public has some sort of a power, and what public does these days in free world is that public directs its hatred and its patheticness and its miserable existence and etc. Those feelings, and it experiences a feeling of power and some sort of importance by redirecting those outrage and etc. toward the ordinary people mostly. Like, they don't redirect it toward the rulers. Like, they are not. By the way, I don't think that they are deceived by the rulers. And very. We stay the same animals, but now we have the technology. But regardless of that, we are still that we say that same animal. So the interest of an I stands above everything else. I stands above anything else. For the human being, mostly, the importance is I. This is how most people are, not everybody. So the masses usually redirect this thing toward things of little importance, and not toward the real things and real issues. Why? Because the public kind of wants to exercise and feel that it's powerful and it matters and its opinions matter, and every single individual kind of experiences those feelings. And public at the same time wants to forget the miserable existence and generally the misery that is life, absurdity that is life. When an absurdity comes when the absolute and unreasonable silence of the world meets and human needs. Basically, when suffering and darkness meets and there's unreasonable complete silence of the world. At last, free thought acts even on the fundamentals of government, and the state finds it agreeable to treat man, who is now more than a machine, in accord with his dignity. Now it's interesting. Finds it agreeable to treat a man who is now more than a machine in accordance with his dignity. The thing about the power generally is that it all comes down to human nature, because power is, whether we like it or not, it's controlled by humans. Like, and dignity, like human dignity, the treatment. Like now, for example, we live in a world where people that produce and basically people that are at the end of the spectrum, but the consumers, people that consume and people that produce are not really close to each other. Basically, it's now because we have a global economy. At some point before the global economy, like you knew the person that worked on the factory, or at least somebody knew it. Like you were kind of from same place, and etc. You knew guys each other who worked there, etc. And you were paying those things. But now there is no connection between those two. So the other party that works there could have easily been treated unfairly, and could have like the many laws could have been broken there, and couldn't. Those ones that produce those things could easily be slaves and not workers. But now it comes to you as a consumer, and you consume it because you kind of don't even know how that thing is produced and in what condition situation. And that's the thing. Like right, in free part of the world, there is those laws, but etc. That's minimum wage, have many laws, right? How things should be, but we have a basically, but hardly anybody asks. Those products that come in this free world, like how they came and how are they were produced and etc. Like how those people, who are those people that worked on it, and how they worked and what they were paid, etc. Because those two things, the one that works and one that pays and or gets this product, they don't know each other, and there is big unknown between those two things. So, and last, free thought acts even on the fundamentals of government and the state, finds it agreeable to treat man, who is now more than a machine, in accordance with his dignity. And now, when we think about this ending of this work, now when we talk about artificial intelligence, when we talk about superintelligence generally, all those things, or even like simple control mechanisms that's available these days, it brings a lot of concerns, questions, and at the end of the day, some sort of very interesting thing relates to this thing. And that's all for now. This is the Enlightenment. And comment down below what you think about that question. Are we where we are right now? Is this the age of enlightened? Are we in the age of enlightenment, or where we are? What do you think? I've given some answer to the question, but it would be interesting to see what you think as well.